My mic sounds nice. Check one. I said my microphone sounds nice when it is on. Check two. Welcome all you streamers back to another episode of Beyond the Rim, #BTR. And I am your host, the Dudster, Nestor Dudley. And this podcast is on location for the second time for this series, which is Black superheroes or African American superheroes. And I am once again been invited into the home of Alan Vickers, who is the manager of New England Comics in Malden, Massachusetts. Malden is 5.5 miles north of the city of Boston. Alan, say hello to the streamers out there.
Hello, streamers. Thank you for having me, Nestor. Appreciate it.
Thank you again for allowing me to come into your home. And this is the second in the series of Black superheroes in the comic books, as I said at the top. And my goal, Alan, is to do these podcasts more than once every other year.
I'm looking forward to our biannual event.
Our last podcast was Icon from the Milestone Comics, and that's available at btrmike.com or wherever you stream your podcast. That's Dudcast number 9. But today we are going to talk about Isaiah Bradley, aka known as the Black Captain America. But before we get into his story, and in the book Truth, Red, White, and Black. So before we get into that, we're going to talk about the writers and the artists of this. And Al, I'm going to let you take that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, the book was written by a writer named Robert Morales, who unfortunately has passed away back 2013, I believe. Very accomplished writer. Worked on several books, including Captain America. He had been an editor at Heavy Metal, Reflex Magazine, Vibe, a serious background in music. And it was drawn by Kyle Baker, who had been in the business since, I believe, the mid-'80s, possibly the early '80s. Another African-American creator, known for his humorous books, Cowboy Wally's Show, Why I Hate Saturn, various projects for Walt Disney. And then along came this very serious project that he put his all into, and it really shows. It's some fabulous art. The two of them supposedly met while both were working at Reflex Magazine. They struck up a good friendship, and later, when Morales was pitched the idea from Marvel, we'd like you to do something with the idea, an inspiration of the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. What could you do for us? Initially, he found the idea odd. He didn't think there was a good fit for it. But eventually he worked out some details, thought about some various things, and realized how he could apply it to a very serious subject. Kyle Baker was brought into the mix, and the two of them sort of bounced ideas off of each other. Both being African-American creators, they were unfortunately too aware of the racism that ran rampant in the military and in the United States, during and post-World War II. They pitched the idea to Marvel. They kind of soft-pedaled it a little bit, afraid that it wouldn't be as well received if it was too serious a subject matter. And instead, Marvel, to their everlasting credit, said, no, throw some hard, fast balls at us, at our public. We don't want just another Captain America story. We want something new here, something for the 21st century. Give us what you got. So they turned up the volume, and word got out that this book was being worked on. And the public reaction was initially kind of opposed. Too many people were, they're going to ruin Captain America. They're going to do things to Captain America that aren't right. But Morales and Baker are fans. Besides being creators, they liked the character. They liked comic books as a medium, which is a terrific medium. So they stuck to their guns. Marvel stuck to their guns. They worked on the project for the better part of a year. It came out in 2004, I believe was its publication date. And the naysayers that were online changed their tones immediately. The book was a huge hit, wonderful success. And even people that had denounced it, let's say, as, oh, this is going to be some sort of a show, were suddenly apologetic. And that's unlike your comic book reader is almost the first one to pipe up with, this is wrong, but almost never to change their mind and then apologize and say, I was wrong. The book changed, the way people looked at the African-American experience in the military. Suddenly it became, with the Tuskegee syphilis experiments only coming to light in the early 70s through a whistleblower and not really being properly investigated until well into the 90s. And a lot of people out there were ignorant of that story, of that situation. And suddenly that opened up education, if you will. It was suddenly there was something to be taught that was being ignored in schools. They were getting out of a comic book. And it did wonderful things for the medium of the comic book. It showed that there are comic books for kids. There's the Batman cartoon. And then there are comic books for adults, just like there are movies and there are books and radio and music. This was reaching a wider audience. And I think Morales and Baker, it's a feather in their caps. Their names, they're talented men, but this is the project that's always going to be associated. And if you were to look them up on Wikipedia, it would probably say, born in and wrote this, born in and drew this. It's a monumental point in comic book history and American history.
And for the streamers who are not familiar with the Tuskegee syphilis study, we're just going to synopsize that. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. That was the complete name of that study. It was shortened to the Tuskegee syphilis study. And the purpose of this study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis. Although the African-American men who participated in this study were told they were receiving free health care from the federal government, they were not. As an incentive for participation in the study, these men were promised free medical care, but were deceived by the public health service, who never informed subject of their diagnosis, the diagnosed placebos, ineffective methods, and diagnosed procedures as a treatment. The men were initially told that the study was only going to last 6 months, but it was extended to 40 years. You heard me right, 40 years. After funding for the treatment was lost, the study was continued without informing the men that they were never treated. None of the affected men was treated with penicillin, despite the fact that by 1947, the antibiotic was widely available and it had become a standard treatment for syphilis. The study continued under numerous public health service supervisors until 1972, which is Allen's point, when it was leaked to the press that the termination in November 16th of that year, again 1972, the study caused the death of 128 participants, either directly from syphilis or from related complications. The 40-year-old Tuskegee study was a major violation of ethical standards. So for the streamers out there that did not know or were not familiar with the Tuskegee syphilis study, just wanted to give very little background history about that, Alan.
Yeah, that's a low point in our history. Terrible behavior. Our government is there to help us, to take care of us. And they abused their authority and their power in that situation. And it's to no real end. Nothing came out of it. As you said, by 47, they knew that penicillin was this remarkable wonder drug. They weren't given it. They knew that this, initially, if I remember correctly, the study was started against African Americans because it was believed that they were more likely to catch syphilis. Mm-hmm. and that they had a harder time fighting off the effects of it. So we'll experiment on them. Well, how does that, but a control group of the same type of person, that doesn't work. And these people had families. They had wives that caught it. They had children that were born congenitally with syphilis for no other reason than a group of really not good men believed these were expendable people. Terrible situation. Something that weighed on Robert Morales when he was conscious, very aware of it, and very conscious of it when he wrote Truth. It is the linchpin that the story runs on. Terrible.
Very much terrible. Very much terrible. So now getting into the story of Isaiah Bradley, the Black Captain America, and as you said before, this was not to rewrite Marvel history. There was Captain America. We all know the story of Steve Rogers. He became Captain America, and we all know that story. We all salute the good captain to this day. But this story actually focuses around three characters. It focuses around Isaiah Bradley, Maurice Canfield, and Sergeant Lucas Evans. And this is three black males that were in different phases of their life and in society. We had Isaiah Bradley, who was born and raised in New York City, basically a newlywed by the time he enlisted.
A young, recently married man. In fact, if I recall correctly, I think it's in the second issue of the series. He's informed by his wife that she's given birth to their daughter. He's not even home for the birth of his first child. And then you have
Sergeant Lucas Evans, a.k.a. Sarge.
Yep, a career man. I believe fought in World War I.
Yes.
Yes. And then stayed in the service and has been through everything that can be heaped on a black man in the military. Raised and lowered in rank like a yo-yo, and gotten used to it. He's a hard man. But he's a career man.
Yeah.
In the end, he likes the military. It's what he does. It's the structure in his life. He gets it. He's just been kind of hardened by the time. And then Maurice
Canfield,
is a child of privilege, raised in an upper middle class at the minimum. But when we first encounter him, he's being put in the military by a judge. He's standing before a judge in a courtroom because he spoke out about the treatment of African Americans and civil rights. And how dare you do that? You've got a choice: go to prison or go into the military. He chooses the military. So we have three characters of different ages, different economic backgrounds, social structures, and if I remember correctly, Evans is from Chicago.
I believe Evans is from Chicago.
I could be wrong there, but urban.
I think it's from Chicago. Maurice Canfield, definitely Philadelphia. And Bradley from New York. So we've got cities, but we have very radically different cities. We have different walks of life. And when the experiment begins in the book, when they become made a part of it, I think they started with something like 300 men. 300 men.
And whittled it away down to those three. And you get the impression that some of it was, legitimately like, oh, that didn't work, this didn't work. And some of it was like, well, let's see what happens if we do this while we're here. What? These are human lives.
These are human lives, but they were not treated as humans.
Not at all.
They were certainly treated as subhumans, and there was segregation in the United States, and there was segregation in the United States Army. Mm-hmm. So these are black men that have volunteered to protect their country,
Yeah.
But yet they were second-class citizens in the war. Mm-hmm. And before we continue on that point, I just want to add to Maurice Canfield. Now, Alan, in life, there isn't a lot of opportunity that you get a chance for a do-over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I have a chance for a do-over, and I'm just going to do this over right now. Our last podcast in this series of black superheroes, it was My Stone Icon, and we talked about the character Freeman IV, August Augustus Freeman IV.
Freeman
IV, and that he was a lawyer. He just kept on coming back as his own son because the terminus being had a long life, and he was found in the slavery days of the South, 1839. And then we had mentioned Reconstruction.
Yeah.
I glossed over Reconstruction, and the streamers let me hear about it. Nesta, we didn't know about Reconstruction. Why didn't you go into Reconstruction? So, Alan, I have an opportunity for a do-over.
Yeah, let loose.
I am going to theorize that Maurice Canfield, the reason why he was of privilege, his father was a doctor and stuff like that. And again, we're talking, the story takes place in 1940. Well, Reconstruction was a 12-year period in our history from 1865 to 1877, where it marked significant history changing in civil rights. Reconstruction ended the remnants of the Confederate succession and abolished slavery, making newly freed slave citizens with civil rights, ostensibly guaranteeing them by the constitutional amendments. So for 12 years, it was actually good to be black in America because America recognized the evils of slavery, and it was like made things equal opportunity for blacks as well. It was a 12-year period where blacks were given land, opportunities for higher education, good paying jobs at the time. Yeah. So it was really America living up to the promises of all men are created equal. So I'm going to theorize that during that period of time, Maurice Canfield's maybe grandfather or father took advantage of that period of time and was able to get the education, go to good schools, and become a doctor. Yep. So that's my theorized.
It stands to reason.
Right.
I mean, it's an excellent point. It's a great way of explaining Maurice himself grew up with these privileges. So, and he's not a bad person because of it when we're introduced to him, but there's a distance between him and Isaiah. Isaiah grows up on the streets of New York. For him, a day out is, going to the World's Fair. And I think we have enough money to have lunch today. Stuff like that. I mean, he was a struggling young man, newly married. Whereas, Canfield, it's just, you wake up and you have things.
Yes.
And it would make sense, he would have to be of the generation removed. The father may have struggled, as you say, maybe it was a grandfather. But the fact that Maurice was able to become his father was able to become a doctor, you almost want to say, there's got to be another generation probably removed that had to struggle, that had to go all through this. And the father may have grown up seeing that and said, my son is not going to struggle.
Right.
I'm going to do what I can for my son. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here maybe, but in the story, when the experimented on individuals are listed as dead, killed in action, Maurice's father can't deal with that grief to a degree where he both murders his wife and kills himself, which says to you he put a lot into his son. His identity was tied up in the continued life and success of his son. So that says to me he wasn't privileged himself all the time. He did all these things so that his son wouldn't have to. I'm going to make a world, however small and insulated it might be, so that my son doesn't go through what I went through at some point. It's such a dark moment, a very truly sad moment in the story. And later when Maurice finds out about it, Kyle Baker did an exceptional, job of portraying this trauma on Maurice's face. Rough moment in the book.
He did. As you mentioned earlier, Alan, it was experimented on 300 African-American males, but we didn't actually really talk about what the experiment was. The experiment was trying to recreate the super soldier serum.
Create for the first time. This predates what Dr. Reinstein, great name, would eventually perfect with Steve Rogers. The experiment we know from the comics and, of course, the film of a few years ago, these are the men that were like, well, we don't know if this is going to work, so we're not going to risk white people.
Right.
We're going to
white men.
We can risk black men.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, the scientist was still trying to work out what would work and what wouldn't. There's a horrifying scene in the book where they need blood to run experiments to make the serum from. And the general or major, I forget his rank now, in charge of the project is calling Washington and asking them to send more colored blood. And while he's on there, I need this. This is important for what we're doing. The professor says to him, blood's blood. We can do it with anything. Just get blood. No, I don't believe that for an instant. And one of the assistants, if you will, in the military, no, black blood is different. I get that stuff. We don't want to waste good blood.
Right.
And you sit there going, men of science having this conversation.
Yes.
And you just, wow, it's really how some people felt once time and probably still do today. Hopefully they're hiding under rocks somewhere and I won't run into them. But my God, you read these things and it's it's not the gunfights and the battles and the Nazis lobbing bombs. It's when you read about men in authority having these ideas. And I'm truly horrified when I read that book. That's when I just, I shudder.
Right.
It's terrible.
Right.
I'm using that word too much. Terrible.
Certainly is terrible. Yet that experiment for the super soldiers serum, and again, it was 300 African-American males. And what they did, they went to the platoon. I think they went into 2 platoons that round up African-American men.
Yeah.
So they got a total of 300. And what they did, Alan, they slaughtered the rest of them.
Yeah, whichever wasn't when they got to the point they needed to be and the experiment was done. They were so paranoid, which just makes perfect sense. They would be paranoid personalities. They have everybody executed that they don't need anymore. Because again, who's going to miss them?
Right. And then they told all the families that they all died in battle. They all died, they all died honorably in battle and all that.
Yeah.
There was one person that just wasn't going to accept that was not going to accept that. Wanted proof, wanted to see the body. It just didn't smell right.
Yeah.
And that was Mrs. Isaiah Bradley.
Faith is no idiot.
Yes, Faith. Was her maiden name Shabazz? Faith?
That sounds correct.
Faith Shabazz, yeah.
Yep.
Faith wasn't having it.
Yeah.
Faith wanted proof.
Yeah. Yeah, she insisted on seeing it. And there is that wonderful line where she, goes back to the Pentagon and says, care to explain to me exactly what kind of bomb turned my husband into a white man? Because she had seen the corpse. And when you see the look of horror, you're thinking, it must be horrible, whatever is in this closed casket. But no, it's because suddenly she's hit with the beginnings of a conspiracy. She's not a fool. She's the smartest character in the book.
Right.
I adore her for that. She goes back to the military and says, "This isn't my husband, and what are you trying to pull?" And then they send another officer, a black officer, to speak with her. And her immediate reaction upon having this guy come up to her is going, "Oh, what are you going to explain it to me in color?" Mm-hmm. And she's like, "I'm not a fool." And he to his credit, that character could quite possibly be legitimate. He explains to her that when a group of men are blown up in a battle, the military does what it can to recover what's left. And sometimes they just have to divvy it evenly so that survivors have closure. They're given something they can bury or cremate or what have you. And she, I don't want to use the word accepts that, but she understands that at an intellectual level, but she's just not buying it.
I think her attitude was, that's plausible.
Plausible, perfect
That's
word.
plausible, but I'm not accepting it.
Yeah, there's more going on here.
Faith never lost faith.
Not at all. Not at all. She's a wonderful character. And the book could almost be said to be about her. As of, I think, page 2, we see her walking with her husband, and she's singing him. Mm-hmm. She's saying little comments, little asides that he sighs and rolls his eyes, and this woman's going to be trouble for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And he's looking forward to that being a long life, because she's a wonderful character. And then when we get to the middle of the series, and we're kind of time jumping, we're getting Captain America in the modern day, who has somehow gotten wind of these experiments and Isaiah and wants to know what happened and what's going on. He goes to the military and they snow him. They just, right. Oh yeah, and he knows it. So what does he do? He goes and finds Faith and, may I talk to you? And she's refreshingly honest. She doesn't pull a punch when she talks to him. Great scenes. And then we go back and forth. We have flashbacks to Isaiah and Maurice and Evans before, they are sort of removed from the story. Mm-hmm. We see the adventures that Isaiah gets into, but they're all clarified by Faith. She catches the reader up to date. This is what happened at that point. This is where we're going. And says a few things to Steve Rogers that he's got to think about. For instance, she mentions that in the experiments, the early days of them, they caused her husband to be sterile.
Right.
They had their daughter before he joined the military, and they weren't going to have any more children. And she says, the early days of that experiment caused sterility, and you just get a look on Captain America's face for a second like, I didn't know that.
Right.
And do I have to think about that? Lots of stuff. And it's her. She is, as the reader, she's our source of information. She leads us through the rest of the story. She's a delight. I wish we could see more of her in mm-hmm. comics, but at the same time, I'm glad they've sort of put her away because I wouldn't want to see her cheapened. Too many sequels.
Right.
This isn't the book about Faith. This is the book that Faith makes me love.
Right.
So, maybe someday, but I kind of hope not.
Isaiah Bradley would eventually become the lone survivor of that experiment, along with Canfield and Evans. It was the three, but then there was an argument or a fight between the three of them because Bradley was reading a comic book about the adventures of Captain America. Yeah. And he started to think, he was like, what's going on here? And Sarge wasn't having it because Sarge was that military man. Yeah. And Maurice Canfield, who basically lost it when he found out about his parents.
Yeah.
So a fight ensued. Two of them did not survive. Isaiah survived, and he was the lone one. So he went on a lone suicide mission.
Yeah. Yeah, into Berlin. Was it directly into Berlin?
I think it was directly.
Enemy lines, let's say. He was paratrooped in there, dropped. And the Captain America movie did a wonderful showing him leaping out of a plane. We saw Isaiah do it first. Mm-hmm. There's so many images that have been popularized in the film that we saw Isaiah do first in this book 5 years before the movie was released. And I think it's wonderful that I sit there and I watch the film and I go, oh yeah, I remember when Isaiah jumped out of the plane. Oh, there's the original shield. Mm-hmm. He doesn't even have Captain America's round shield. He's got the shield-shaped shield.
He got the shield shape, and the shield, along with a tattoo on one of his arms, had the double V.
Yeah.
V for victory over the Axis.
Yeah.
And also V for victory at home for racial injustice.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice touch. And it shows. Well, I'm about to attribute this to Morales, but who knows? Maybe it wasn't in his script. Quite possibly Kyle Baker may have said, I'm going to do this, drew it in there, and Morales may have said, well, what's that? Oh, well, I read about this thing. Oh, well, I'm glad you did. Who knows which way that went? It's a wonderful touch. It's the nice thing about the book. We get Isaiah in Captain America's costume. He steals it.
He steals the costume to go on this mission.
Yeah.
To go on this suicide mission.
Yeah, not coming back. And that's what's so great about it is he understands the importance of the costume. he's the living flag. He's going to go there, and he's going to be remembered. And he knows that the effect that will have on troops rallying, on kids at home, and and black children. Mm-hmm. Did you see what the Black Captain America did? One of the things Marvel, I think, very smartly did, the idea that there are comic books in the Marvel universe,
right?
And there was and still is a Captain America book, because that's what he's about. He's in a red, white, and blue outfit. He's propaganda. So what do you get him out there? Captain America was under production as a comic book before we were actually at war. Pearl Harbor hadn't happened yet. The people at Marvel Comics knew this is inevitable. And a lot of them were Jewish. Mm-hmm. So they had family still in Europe. Very similar to the Black Vine that is mentioned in Truth, where black soldiers and black citizens knew things that other people didn't because they had people everywhere. Mm-hmm. There was somebody, I got a guy who works in this building. I got a guy that is married to this person, and she told him and he told him. A lot of American Jews during the 30s and 40s knew what was happening in Europe because they had family over there. So when things got really bad, they were putting it into movies, comic books, radio shows. It was out there before, while we were as a people, as a government, saying, no, we're not going to go to war. This will be fine. Don't worry, we'll work it out. A lot of the Jewish creators were going, this guy's crazy. Have you listened to him? We're not going to get over this. So I think it's the very first issue of Captain America. He's punching Hitler. He's out and out punching a national leader. Right. Because we knew this, we were going to be angry at this guy.
And that was on the cover, right?
On the cover.
On the cover,
yeah,
yes.
On the cover. And, after that, I want to say, I think the first issue of Captain America came out, and I'm really reaching into my creaky old memory here, but I think within weeks of Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. I think it dropped on the stand, and people looked at it and said, well, it's not like we're at war. And then suddenly we were. And I was part of the success of Captain America was people said, as soon as people were afraid, they heard that radio news broadcast of what had happened in Pearl Harbor, much like, you and I probably went through with 9/11.
Exactly.
It's the same sort of emotional impact. You don't know what's going on. You're hearing conflicting stories, or you're not getting the whole thing, but something horrible has just happened.
I mean, America is under attack.
Right.
This stuff does not happen in America.
Right.
Foreign powers do not attack America.
And we're not part of Europe. We are on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific, depending on what side you come. We are isolated is not the right word, but we got a moat around the castle that divides the planet.
Yes.
We don't really have to worry about stuff like that. Yeah, my mother, in a conversation with her recently, talked about being a child growing up in Quincy near the shipyards during World War II. And every time you heard a plane, she was afraid it was somebody come to bomb the shipyards, under the bed, that kind of thing. You and I, we never experienced anything like that until 9/11. And I think a lot of people that were terrified by Pearl Harbor went to the newsstand, looked at the papers, and then next to the newspapers, there's this kid's book showing a guy beating the shit out of Hitler. Yeah. And it was like, wow, what is that? And that character took off. You think about all the other characters of the time, the Patriot and the Shield and all those. They come, they go, they come, they go. As somebody remembers, they own them. And when we better put a book out if we want to keep the copyright. Captain America just kept going.
Right.
Because it was the first, it was perfect. And I find what's interesting about Isaiah Bradley, he's registering at those same levels, but they're not going to talk about him. It's, you're not going to get the costume. We don't need you anymore. We figured out how to do you. And now we're going to do it to the guy that looks like the Aryan ideal over here, except the only way he's 98 pounds, whatever it was. him we're going to give the shield and the flag outfit and the whole bit. You go back to your room.
Right.
And no, he didn't join the military to be a guinea pig. He, joined up, fight for his country, his country. And now his wife and his daughter, I may not be coming back from this, but they're going to be safe. And over he goes. And, what was it, 2004, if I'm remembering correctly, when the book came out. So it's almost like when Captain America finds out about it, the world finds out about it. And it's such a loss.
Right.
Wow. Can you imagine what it would have been like to find out that a black man had single-handedly tried to go over there and punch Hitler, in early 41, you know? What a great story that was kept from the world.
Exactly.
I'm going to use the word terrible again.
Yeah. That suicide mission, Alan, he was, his mission was to go in because the Nazis was trying to create their own super soldier serum to give to their soldiers. So he went in there and just basically just tore down the place, and there were hostages there and all this stuff. I mean, basically a one-man gang just ripped through it. I mean, he was just, you want to talk about somebody who was badass? He was badass. The only thing that took them down was when they had like an acid, I think it was like an acid shower, acid poisons.
Yeah, he wasn't prepared for chemical.
Right.
Something that honestly was so bad during World War One that countries forswore ever doing something like that. It wasn't until we had the Nazis during World War II that nations started using things like, cyclone gas and horrible things. He was prepared for a traditional fight. That's how he thought. It's how he was trained. Mm-hmm. Although it's interesting to point out that Sarge, who became a part of the experiment, was initially there to prepare them for any eventuality, and said, "You got to think about it. Stuff's going to happen. You've got to think about it ahead." And there was a time he had them climbing through cow manure to get to wherever, the other side of a field for their training. And they were like, "Why would you do that to us?" And he's like, "Because you've got to be prepared for anything. You feel awful now, don't you? Yeah. Imagine if you had to do that and then fight." And that was, Isaiah, was, maybe. And then he goes overseas and he goes on his suicide mission. He has to, which is never said in the book, but longtime fans know would have been the creation of the Red Skull. Mm-hmm. The Red Skull was originally more of a propaganda character, but over time, retcons like Truth that were done, elements added to the story, was that the Red Skull was the first attempt by Nazis to create a Captain America before there was a Captain America. And Isaiah had to stop that. And he goes over there and he's a top soldier, a terrific soldier, but he's just a little underprepared, not ready for that weird acid shower. Mm-hmm. They get him, and it debilitates him. It doesn't just, he's not beaten up by another man. He's choking to death. He's feeling sick. He's nauseous. He's physically harmed by it. And it allows a greater physical force of soldiers to overpower him.
Right.
He doesn't go down without a fight.
Right.
It's an action flick scene too. And I got to give Morales his credit there. That's right out of a script of an excellent action flick. And Baker did a fantastic job of choreographing the fights. This is a guy whose background in comics, he grew up loving old cartoons. He wanted to do comic strips and cartoons, and he did those. He did funny books, but here he is illustrating a wonderful battle scene. I mean, when your chest swells and you square your shoulders when you watch Isaiah fighting Nazis, because this is right out of Indiana Jones. This is terrific. I mean, he's a true hero. He's the funny thing is, for years everybody would say the blue-eyed, lantern-jawed hero that would play Tarzan or something. And Isaiah, he's a black man. He is not what Hollywood used to push. but damn if he wasn't a better hero than all of them put together, you know? It's an amazing, great issue. And the fact that it ends with him being taken down, beaten, and beaten. I should use that word too. They don't say, oh, well fought, Captain America, and then, chain him and, give him a good meal. They beat him up.
Yeah.
He's not tortured. He's abused. He's horribly abused. The way angry men in war treat the guy that just kicked the hell out of them. And you end the issue on that note where they've got him, and you're like, oh my God, I got to come back next issue.
Right.
It's one of the nice things about serialized comics that you don't really get so much anymore because we read them so much as graphic novels, collections, catching you at the end of an issue, so you gotta come back. Oh, I can't wait a month. Are you kidding me? But we do because we gotta know.
And that's when the book's put out on time.
Yeah, no, don't even. Don't get me going on that. That's a whole nother podcast.
Next issue, he's captured and he's brought in front of El Fuhrer himself, Hitler, and Hitler offers him an opportunity.
El Fuhrer. Can you mix two languages like
that? Yeah. El Fuhrer. Hitler offers him an opportunity to betray his country and fight on the side of the Axis. Yeah. And Isaiah wasn't having any problem. He wasn't having any of that. And if you remember, do you remember what he said?
No.
He said his wife would kill him if he would.
Right. Again.
We bring her back to faith.
Back to faith. I mean, she is the middle of this story, and it's funny, I remember when I read the scene when Hitler says to him, "We can use you. You're there. We'll take care of you." Think back to the look on Hitler's face when Jesse Owens accepted that gold medal at the Olympics.
Right.
Hitler didn't mean it.
Hitler didn't mean it whatsoever. He did not mean it whatsoever. And I'm sure that Isaiah remembers that because Hitler was trying to play on what was going on in the United States.
Yes.
Saying that you guys are seen as a second-class citizen and all that. You're probably not being treated right in the army. So what, let Germany, embrace, embrace Germany. Yeah. Fight on our side and stuff. And Isaiah's no dummy because the whole world knows Hitler's plan about the Aryan race and all this stuff, the blonde hair and blue eyes. So he wasn't buying that. Yeah. And Hitler wasn't even sincere with that anyway, because what they were going to do is just dissect him and try to reverse engineer that formula so he can finally create his master race of formulas of soldiers rather.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. One of the things horrible at the time was the United States had, in the 30s, 20s, I believe, investigated the idea of eugenics, the idea that we could breed a better race of people. And part of that involved hospitals making checklists of, well, no, this kid has a learning disability, and this kid was born this way, and this kid was born that way. And as we all know, the whites are the better race, so let's, if we got to get rid of of course, when the general public became aware of it, it was, no, we're not going to embrace that. We're not going to do that. But Nazi Germany looked at those old records, if you will, and said, what a great idea. So Isaiah would have grown up in a time when people were talking about perfecting the species. He would have been, if he was fighting in the 40s, he was born in the 20s. He would have lived through all that stuff. And he's not a dope. His faith might be the brains, but he's not a dope. And it's, to his credit that there's no moment of, will I do this? Won't I do this? His wonderful statement. Yeah, no, faith will kill me.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, dude.
It's just not going to happen. So Isaiah was eventually rescued by freedom fighters and stuff and returned to America. And what happens when he returns to America? We're going to find out on the other side of this break, other side of this PSA. So Nestor Dudley, Alan Vickers, talking about Isaiah Bradley, a.k.a. the Black Captain America. We will be right back after the break.
Pardon me, Batman, but we're rolling.
1 second. 999. 1,000. Sorry, had to get my swole on. Camera ready, you know. Okay, so I hear you need my help. Something about a dude named COVID?
Actually, we're here to discuss the novel coronavirus, also known as COVID-19.
Lame nickname, but show me where he is and I will bat-ter him. Bad pun intended.
I'm afraid you can't beat this up.
Wrong.
It's invisible.
You're invisible.
Look, it's not a person, it's a virus. Viruses are tiny particles that infect living hosts to reproduce.
Gross.
There are millions of different viruses with all kinds of shapes and sizes. The name coronavirus refers to its shape, which, when magnified, looks kind of like a crown.
Not really.
COVID-19 can cause flu-like symptoms and possibly lead to some very serious conditions.
Hey, not to be a buzzkill, but this is all kind of scary. Not for me, of course, but for the kids.
It's perfectly normal to feel scared or anxious, so if you're feeling this way, speak to a trusted adult, like a mother or father.
Yeah, I'm an orphan, so...
Any trusted adult will do. Most healthy people, especially children, show very mild symptoms, but it can be much more serious for those with other health issues, so stopping the spread is especially important for them. And remember, while we can't beat it up, if we work together...
I work alone.
If we work together, we can beat this.
I got this. Look, you guys can be superheroes by simply listening to health experts and helping stop the spread of the virus, which is far less difficult than my job fighting crime, but still super important. Remember the things that we can all do to help get us through this time safely. Wash your hands, maintain good social distancing, and watch Lego Batman on repeat. How's that?
Oh, exactly what I should have expected.
I win again.
Nestor Dudley, Alan Vickers, back after that message, after that PSA from Lego Batman. Now, Alan, I know that is a different universe, and you know me, you know I prefer the DC universe.
Yeah, you are a Batman man.
Lego Batman.
Lego Batman's fun. Lego Batman is there's no wrong Batman. You know, I grew up with Adam West. That was,
and so did I.
You know, my first Batman.
Yeah.
Is it the Batman? Well, hell no. You know, I love the Dark Knight stuff of the late '60s, early '70s. The Frank Miller stuff of the '80s. Not the biggest fan of the crazy Batman that stays up all night of the '90s. But there's some good stuff in there. And Lego Batman is just another beautiful facet. And Will Arnett's just a funny guy. So I'm so glad that took off for him, because he does a great job. Does a great job for everybody. I love anything where a dad and a kid can sit there and watch, Bullwinkle or The Simpsons or anything, and dad can laugh. And then the kid can go, why is dad laughing at that? I don't understand what he just said. Oh, you will when you're older. Mm-hmm. And as those Batman Lego things, they're like that. They're wonderful.
So before the break, Alan, Isaiah Bradley was rescued by freedom fighters.
Yes, he was.
Returned back to the United States of America. And how was he greeted? Let the streamers know.
Oh, he was told he was going to prison for life. Because
and why is that?
He stole Captain America's costume.
So let that sink in, streamers. Suicide mission. World War II, WWII, as Fred G. Sanford would say, the big one. Captured, a prisoner of war, brought back home.
Mistreated. Before he's brought back home. And brought back home through every, back alley, every, hidden in a tramp steamer kind of thing. It wasn't like, he was brought back in a parade. It was quick, climb in this box. We're going to put a bag on you. We're going to hide you and get you back. His rescue was just as rough as his incarceration. And then to be, greeted with, you stole some clothing. Come on, this is right out of Crime and Punishment.
Right.
This is just wrong. But it's a further example of you're our dirty little secret, and this is the legalese we're going to use to keep you hidden. and he's sent off to Leavenworth. They actually make a point of saying he's in Leavenworth for
life.
You have received life, and he was there for
17 years.
17. I was going to say that was a couple of decades. Yeah,
17 years.
And who got him out?
Faith. Faith kept on writing President Eisenhower monthly.
Yeah,
Kept
a
on
letter every month.
Right, and Isaiah was released on President Kennedy's inauguration day.
Yeah. It was
17 years.
Eisenhower's the president's pardons.
Yes,
they made a point of saying it was that inauguration day that he was let loose. Good for Ike. I mean, wow, that had to be done. But Faith, as I believe there's a line in the comic, she never lost faith.
Never lost faith.
She kept doing it, and I love when she's telling Captain America about it, and her grandkids are playing in the other room, and her daughter is, checking on Dad. It's such a warm, loving household, and everybody's interacting and talking and sharing and having fun. And there's this guy dressed like a flag sitting there having tea, coffee, whatever it was. It's just a wonderful image. And as Faith explains, we finally got, Isaiah back, but the experiments took their toll. Now, there's something here. This will be the nerd in me. The whole reason you have me here today. In the original Captain America appearances, they show him being injected with the formula, but they also show a lot of machinery. And as we would get later in the comic books, usually early 70s stories, and what they followed up with and kept as part of the film, the super soldier serum is a two-part thing. There's the serum, and then there's being exposed to a radiation or something called a Vita ray. And with people having tried to duplicate the professor's work, they could sometimes, recreate the serum, but nobody knew how the Vita rays worked. And without the Vita rays, the serum never quite works right, which is why we had some other bad Captain Americas show up in the 50s and the 60s. It was Marvel's way of explaining why, even though the comic continued into the 50s, Steve Rogers was somehow frozen in ice in 45,
right,
and didn't come back until I think it was 65, maybe, Avengers #4. With Isaiah, you had the double issues that, one, the serum was even more experimental. Two, he suffered some truly physical abuse at the hands of the Nazis. And three, the unspoken thing is that at no point do you ever see the Vita ray introduced into his story. That's clearly something that the professor landed on between Isaiah and Steve Rogers. So Captain America, I love that this is, again, unspoken when he's hearing the backstory of why Isaiah is in bad shape. He's got to wonder if this is a potential future for him. Mm-hmm. And I have read that apparently Robert Morales, when writing the story, was inspired, if it's the right word, by what had happened with Muhammad Ali. As he got older, he suffered a lot of brain damage in the ring. I mean, we I'm so pretty, and his record is so amazing. The man took some hits, and he walked them off. Part of his legend was he never let you see him wince or cry, an amazing athlete. Same with Isaiah. Here's this guy that did all these things, but he took some hits, he took some damage that we'll never know, because it's not important to the story. It's more important to the mood of the story. We know this happened. But Captain America has to wonder, is it because of what happened to him? Or am I going to, one day I'm going to slow down and find that tremor in my hand. Faith even says that Isaiah can't even really talk anymore.
Right.
Such a sad moment. But man, he can smile. When she brings Captain America in to see him, and Captain America presents him, he's recovered what's left of that original costume and says, "This is yours. Thank you." for your service. Captain America has just said, soldier, you did a damn good job, and we all owe you. And you get that wonderful smile on Isaiah's face.
Because at the end of the day, Alan, that's what all the soldiers just wanted. They just wanted a thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for
you're
your
not far wrong.
service.
Yeah. Yeah. it's line them up and tell them to do something. And then when you're done with them, go, oh, are you still here? Well, I can't believe that, that kind of behavior. And, not only, Isaiah, to Faith's credit, he got her home and his wife said, I love you. And here's your daughter. And years later, I got to say, these are your grandchildren. You survived. Not only did you do good, but you made it. You're here. And there's that wonderful bit you find out she's a teacher now. And she talks to her. She shows up. In fact, when Captain America first meets her, she's Muslim and she's wearing a burqa. And I think that's so fascinating, too, is that we talked earlier about Maurice and Sarge and Isaiah being from different backgrounds, different walks of life and the whole bit. And here we are seeing the Muslim religion being portrayed, but not belabored. Mm-hmm. We you and I pass Muslims every day in the street. They don't stop to, hi, by the way, I'm a Muslim. Right. Oh, well, tell me more, or I'm gay. Oh, tell me more about that. No, they're just people. We pass them, we get on with our lives, they get on with theirs. And it's wonderful. She just happens to be in a burqa when Captain America meets her. She doesn't go off about it. She doesn't talk about it. There's no lecture to you and I, the reader. Oh, look, a different religion, something that is never, well, now in comics, they're very much, more diversified than ever. Back then, again, this book did so much. It portrayed something that a lot of people just didn't see. In comics, it was, you couldn't have Jewish people. To this day, I insist that Peter Parker is meant to be Jewish, I mean, it's such a, the background is just like, just shy of saying it.
Right.
And just a few years ago, The Thing and the Fantastic Four finally portrayed.
Right.
Jack Kirby was Jewish. Stan Lee was Jewish. Come on, they wrote what they knew. They drew what they knew. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to see that, Faith just shows up in that burqa without any getting up on a soapbox and having to lecture about, another religion. Captain America just talks to her about her husband. That's what they're there for. And I love she makes a comment about, she's talking to him, she's wearing the burqa, and she's, I'm sorry, I usually take this off as soon as I get in the house. And she takes it off, and we still see at 70 or whatever, she's still beautiful.
Yeah.
She's got that cloud of silver hair around the face that is still so just lovely. It's a wonderful moment. And then she mentions that one of the reasons she wears the burqa is it desexualizes her identity when she's talking to her students. The fact that she's a woman doesn't enter into what she's talking to them about. Mm-hmm. So when she teaches them, it's the subject matter, right, and how good she is at being a communicator, not a woman. Great moment. Again, Morales and Baker doing something so subtle. I didn't read these words in the story that, she communicates, she's a great teacher, but after a panel, I know it. Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful bit. I didn't use the word terrible. Awesome. I used the word wonderful. See how this book treats you? You go into the darkest places, and by the time you're getting to the end, it's lightning. It's enlightening even. And I love that final bit when Captain America is, eye to eye, face to face with the man that did it before him. And they're standing in front of that wall of everybody that Isaiah's ever met. And you realize this guy, wow, he's this is the life. He knows, he's firsthand, he's met President Obama,
Muhammad Ali,
Richard
Pryor, Maya Angelou, Spike Lee.
Yeah.
It's just Flavor Flav. Yeah. It was just all those
wonderful pictures, including the creators of the book.
Yes.
There's a little photograph where you go, hey, that's Kyle Baker and Robert Morales. That's okay.
Yes. And Stan Lee. Stan Lee shows up no matter where in the Marvel Universe. Yeah. Stan Lee, God rest his soul. Yep. He certainly has his cameos. You got that right.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's, for such, as we said at the very beginning, shameful period in American history, about the syphilis study. The fact that recently, the Watchmen television show based on a comic had to explain to half of America about the Tulsa riots, the massacre, the amount of people that came up to me in the store. And that's not real, is it? Of course it's real. There's so many things that have been glossed over, sugar-coated, whatever. And this book brings all that kind of darkness, that shame to the surface. It doesn't leave you there. It doesn't leave you hanging, feeling bad. You get to the end, and you go, "Wow, look what Isaiah Bradley accomplished."
Right.
And it's such an uplifted ending.
And the thing is, with all the standing in front of the wall, all the famous people that he met, you had mentioned in the first half of this podcast about the Black Vine. Mm-hmm. About Black Vine and all that. So Isaiah was not known to the general public, but he was known to Black Vine. Yes. It was he was an urban myth. He was a legend.
Yeah.
There was a Black Captain America.
Yeah. Word got out there and people came looking for him. It's wonderful to imagine that, as you say, an urban myth. Somebody says, "Did you ever hear about?" "Oh, that's not true. I met the guy. You got to introduce us." And his legend grew. I like the idea that that's why Steve Rogers didn't hear about him for so long. It took a while. Who knows? Maybe the Falcon, said to him one day, "You ever heard about him?"
Right.
Yeah. Right. No, who's this?
Well, Luke Cage, Power Man, certainly knew.
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And nice segue there, if I might, Nestor. The whole origin of Luke Cage, Power Man, back in the 70s, was an attempt for someone to recreate the super soldier serum, or in this case, he's going to be working from that Vita Ray end of things. Mm-hmm. And we got another fantastic character. Love Luke Cage.
And I'm sure we will do Luke Cage in a future.
I'll make a point of it, man.
In a future podcast.
I will dog you until we do that. One of my favorite books as a kid, and to this day, really.
Well, the next podcast will not be in the Marvel universe. It might be in the DC universe because you know me, my universes. I prefer the DC. I know Marvel. I know there are others out there. So, but yes, we're gonna talk about as many of them as we possibly can.
Yeah, we get some wonderful characters over at DC. We're seeing a resurgence of the Milestone line. An announcement that we might see some Icon and Static films, which would be fantastic.
I would love to see an Icon film. I would just love to see an Icon film. They're talking about making Superman black, and I'm like, don't make Superman black. You got Icon.
Yeah, you got Icon.
You got Icon.
Yeah, do Icon. Hardware. They're talking about that character being brought up. And currently on the shelves, we have a run that DC Comics did, what they're calling Future State, which is possible futures of the DC universe, including the son of longtime character Lucius Fox, an African-American, his son Jace being what they refer to as the next Batman. It's the title of the book. And apparently it did well enough that he's being introduced into regular continuity.
Good.
So, yeah. Good. So, there's going to be a lot of stuff for us to talk about.
Good. To wrap up Isaiah Bradley, I do want to say that his legend was so much and so popular amongst the Black Vine that he was also invited to the wedding of the Black Panther and Storm.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot about that. That's a nice little touch. Yeah. The idea that and again, it's so much for I can't say enough good things about Robert Morales and Kyle Baker. These two men, it's a 7-issue series, which means it didn't run for a year, and it was intended to be 7. But we talk about it today, and the character was so well received, so well thought out, that it immediately became an instant addition to the Marvel Universe. He's at the wedding of the Black Panther. He's mentioned here, there. His grandson, Eli, that we talked about earlier, pre-show.
And we're going to talk about Eli now. We're certainly going to mention Eli.
Here we go. Eli is the founder of the group called the Young Avengers. They're all like legacy characters. descended from or in some backstory way related to the actual Avengers. And Eli was filling the role of the Captain America character in the group and calling himself Super Patriot and showing up and eventually revealing himself to be Bradley's grandson. And he's a great character. And right now, I mean, it's rumor, but I'm going to throw it out there because of some recent events in the WandaVision television show, the things that we know are going to be happening in the Captain Marvel upcoming movie. There's an upcoming Hawkeye television series. All these things that Marvel and Disney has planned, a lot of people think we're going to be seeing a Young Avengers project, in which case we could be seeing Eli. And if we see Eli, and it's going to be, he's the grandson of the original Black Captain America, people have to know that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
We could be seeing that, that could be a live action movie, a television series. And God, that would be a wonderful television show. Certainly with its finite story, that's a fine 2-hour film right there. I'd rather see TV. Then it would be on longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could be getting the Young Avengers, and these characters would be getting their due, and I think it's a great thing. And again, like I say, such a short-lived project that made such a big contribution to the Marvel Comics books. It's permanent. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
That's the nicest thing about it is, it's in 10 years, it's not going to become what happened to da-da-da. We'll have a great grandson, or, Eli will, who knows, marry whoever, and it'll just be this dynastic story. I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait to see that either. Well, Alan, the time has flown. We've gone over the hour, but that's okay. We were talking about the break. It was like not all podcasts can be under an hour, just as long as that content is there.
Yep.
And it's solid. And I just enjoy doing this podcast because not only did we talk about the character, not only did we talk about the story, we got to give some historical facts, what happened in this country in terms of the Tuskegee syphilis study. And I got to do that do-over.
There you go.
Do-over.
Yeah. You got your second shot. Nice.
Of the Reconstruction Era.
Yeah. No, I if I make a comment here, just I love the medium of the comic book. I think it is as strong a medium, and I'm going to keep using that word, as film, as television, as the theater, as the novel. It can do things, it's a visual medium, and it's the written word, and it can be written for any age group, and it can be informative, and it can simply be just electrifyingly, action-oriented. One thing, two little stories really quick here.
Well, it doesn't have to be quick. We've gone over the hour, so that's, and you know me, I love a good story.
I was saying that when I was a kid, I couldn't tell you where I heard the word laser for the first time. It could have been anywhere. But the first time I ever found out what it meant was in a comic book. And it was because a writer chose not to write down to me, to his audience. He, what is it? Light amplification through stimulated emission of radiation. And that made me look and see, what do all those words mean when you put them together? Mm-hmm. And reading a comic, you would find out so many things. You find out about history, the sides that people don't want you to know, or you find out about science, or you find out about anything, really. It's a great medium because it's written down, and you don't have to say, what did he just say? You go back and you look it up again. Wonderful medium. Second thing I just want to mention, I used to work with a guy decades ago, and he was from Saudi Arabia. Moved to this country with his mother and brother, very young age, 5 or 6 years of age. And his mother gave him comic books, and he read those, and it's what allowed him to keep up in school when he was learning English, because he had a visual image to what are they talking about?
Wow.
And he could go back, he could turn a page back, and say, oh, it means this. And because it was fun, it taught him how to read. And I'm going to just sound pompous for a second here. There's a wonderful quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes that reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. And it's very true.
It is.
And in this day and age where we've got social media and we're glued to our big TVs and we're streaming this and that, they keep saying print is dead. It's not dead. It's out there. Find it. Mm-hmm. And comic books are so much fun. There's so much there. They're humorous. They are chilling. They are informative. And I think that Truth, Red, White, and Black is a perfect example of all of that. You're laughing one minute, you're shocked the next, you're excited the next. Faith, you fall in love with her. It's a wonderful book. Unfortunately, I believe it's out of print right now. So if anybody listening gets an opportunity, you've read it already, you own it, you come across a copy somewhere, pick it up, pass it on to somebody else, and don't be afraid to write to Marvel Comics and say, why isn't this in print? Shame them into putting it back out there, because it's that good. It really deserves to be out there. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I think it's a hard thing to find right now, partly because nobody's talking about it, and they need to. We're at a perfect time right now in our nation's history. Mm-hmm. It's not just a nice entertaining piece; it's a nice historical text piece. It should be out there. So, call, write, email, nudge the hell out of them. Make sure this thing's back in print.
Well, Alan, thank you very much. We're going to wrap this up once again. I appreciate you inviting me into your home to do this podcast. And I'm looking forward to our next podcast, which is going to be sooner than 2 years from now.
I like the sound of that.
Let's go a few months from now.
Yeah, we go. Yep.
A few months from now.
Yeah.
So once again, I want to thank Alan Vickers, who is the manager of New England Comics, which is in Malden, Massachusetts on Pleasant Street. Malden is 5.5 miles north of the city of Boston. Beyond the Rim is available on Apple Podcasts. Beyond the Rim is available on Spotify. Beyond the Rim is available on Google Podcasts. Beyond the Rim is available on Stitcher. Beyond the Rim is available on Amazon Music. Beyond the Rim is available on Podbay. Beyond the Rim is available on TuneIn Radio. Beyond the Rim is available on iHeartRadio. Beyond the Rim is available on YouTube or wherever you stream your podcasts. Visit our website at btrmic.com. That's btrmic.com, where you can stream past episodes and discover additional podcast platforms where Beyond the Rim is available. #follow, #stream, #retweet, Twitter handle @NestorDudley. Until next time, streamers, buenas noches. Hooches cooches. I came in peace. I leave with love. This is for the red, the black, and the green. Living cool, living calm, living clean. I'm out.